This is Greg Hansen's Video Notebook, brought to you by Domino's Pizza. I'm Star Sports editor Ryan Finley, joined by Greg Hansen. Greg, this week the Star begins a countdown to 25 best high school football coaches in Southern Arizona history. You've been here to see a lot of Southern Arizona high school football. I'm sure you have some favorites. Don't give me an order per se, but give me your favorite 4 or 5.
I would put in the first conversation Richard Sanchez of Sunnyside High School. That guy took over a program that was awful. And they won 2 state championships, and they were a state championship contender for like 10 consecutive years.
He was a wrestling coach, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he had been an assistant football coach. His background was wrestling, but what he did there was underappreciated by the population of Tucson at large, I thought. And since he's left, Sunnyside hasn't been good. So put it in that perspective. And then you go back in the 60s and beyond. Before that, John Malama at Tucson High won 2 state titles, and Roland Gridley at Tucson High, when it was the only game in town, they won about 5. I can't remember the exact number. So those guys have to be mentioned.
This is Greg Hansen's Video Notebook, brought to you by Domino's Pizza. Ryan Finley here with Greg Hansen. You just mentioned 3, obviously, a couple of the big names. When you think of high school football in Tucson, I think you think both of Ollie Mayfield from Tucson High and then Sabino. And then you talk about the great Vern Friedley and what they were able to accomplish here. Both of those guys coached for very long periods of time, and yet were able to, for the most part, sustain great success.
Vern Friedley, if he would have played in the classification that suited Amphi's student population, would have won 5 or 7 state championships. But he was such a tough sucker. He chose to play at 5A with Mesa Mountain View and Scottsdale schools, and they came this close about 5 times as a, with 2,000 fewer kids. He won 1 state title in 1979. He should have won in 97 when a bad call cost him the game late in the game. He won 331 games, which no one's ever going to touch that here.
At the time, he was the state's winningest head coach.
Right, and he was the epitome of an old school football coach. The kind, if they ever make a movie, he's going to be the guy they model it after.
When I was a young reporter, Greg, I went out here to do a story on Vern Friedley, and I remember having high school football flashbacks. Because you show up and you see the guy, and he's got the Sansa shorts, he's got the hat pulled down over his head. Kids are driving the sled. I mean, like a movie. You walk in, and this is old school football practice. I mean, this wasn't a guy who particularly cared to throw the ball.
Oh, he played that wishbone for 30 years. Wow. And it's funny, and the best coach with him at the time was Jeff Skurin. Couldn't get 2 more different human beings. Skurin wins 3 titles in the right classification for Sabino, and then did magic tricks at Santa Rita.
And now he's at Catalina Foothills and turning them around too.
Right.
We talk about Ollie Mayfield, certainly a guy who, along with his son Todd, sort of a first family of Tucson football coaches here. How impressive was the success he was able to have at Tucson High?
They had personnel like no one's had personnel in Tucson. I've read and talked to people about that for 25 years. And the players Tucson High had in 1970 and 71, no one's duplicated that. They just steamrolled people.
But coaching was in Ollie Mayfield's blood, and this is one of my all-time favorite Greg columns and stories, so I'm going to have to revisit this here. Greg, you have a summer place up in Colorado where you visit from time to time, and the local coach there was Ollie Mayfield?
After he retired at Sabino, he moved to basically Winter Park, Colorado, in a little town called Granby, and their coach quit, and they asked Ollie, who worked for the Forest Service there in the summers, could you coach us? And he reluctantly did, and they became a powerhouse. And he became a legend. I was in that place we have last year getting Dish TV installed, and the Dish guy had played for Ollie Mayfield. He told me how when they drove by his house every night, they honked the horn, because he told them, I want to know where you are. So every time, he says, even now, 40 years later, when he drives down the highway, he honks the horn for Ollie.
And just goes to show, too, that even when you're not being paid to coach, even when you don't have future college and NFL players at your disposal, coaches like coaching. I mean, it is in the blood, I think.
And he was in charge, and those kids wanted him to approve of what they were doing.
It's an awesome story. We're going to leave it right there. For Greg Hansen, I'm Ryan Finley. This is Greg Hansen's Video Notebook. We'll see you next time.
At Domino's, we're slowing down to make our handmade pan pizza the right way, taking our time to hand press the fresh dough into the pan, adding 2 layers of cheese, and slowing our ovens down to get the crust golden and crispy. So try a Domino's handmade pan pizza with 2 toppings for just $7.99.